Thanks everyone for tuning into our meeting this morning for an update on where we are with our Brownfields assessment grant that we were approved for from the EPA. You'll recall we were awarded for this back in the spring of 2023, and our contract with the EPA to begin work officially kicked off that July. So that puts us officially at Q1, year 2 of the 4-year grant. And while there's nothing particularly groundbreaking about all of this today, we do want to make sure that we're doing our part to keep all of you informed, as this is a regional project and it includes sites that are in many of your communities. Just a quick agenda to throw at you. I'm going to get us back on pace with just a quick refresher on what this is all about and what's been done so far. So I'll cover some programmatic updates and get into our ongoing working collaboration with Tracy Costa and her team from Verdantis. I'll offer a quick summary on where we are with respect to our program budget. Like I mentioned, we're now officially in year 2, so the wheels are turning and we're moving things along. We'll have Tracy update us on some details on the sites we're currently targeting and performing work at, a couple of them. And since we're still on the hunt for more sites, she's going to talk a little bit about some of the things communities can look for to, identify good candidates that maybe folks haven't quite thought of yet. Lastly, we'll get into next steps and where we can go from here at this point. So hopefully today will just put us all on the same page about what's been done and where we are and what our next steps are. So as a quick reminder, for this project, OCPC was awarded $500,000 from the EPA for this assessment grant to address those burdensome brownfield sites that have documented environmental concerns that exist in our southeast region, so our 17 communities. And specifically, the funds are used for communities, or OCPC in this case, to hire a qualified environmental professional, a QEP, which we've done, to conduct assessment activities and planning for cleanup and redevelopment on commercial industrial properties. You will recall, so phase 1 assessments, I'm sure you know by now, are essentially a deep review of all the existing information available about a particular site, and the phase 2 assessments, identifying and sampling, naturally sampling for contaminants at these locations. And ideally, the goal for us is to target sites that are stymied by contamination, but that are positioned well for cleanup or future redevelopment, right? Our application talked about sites along the MBTA rail corridor, but for purposes of our region, we're willing to look at everything. So obviously not all properties will necessarily fit into that description 100%, but that's okay. In that vein, we've struggled a little bit to find good sites, but we're happy to settle for properties where assessment activities can in any way be helpful to the community or for their plans for a particular area. So again, this is a 4-year grant, so it certainly is long-term, and our plan is to keep you all engaged throughout the process. So since we last met, there's been a lot of progress. We've gone from securing a QEP, qualified environmental professional, from the RFP process we had early last year, and have been searching for sites and beginning assessment work on the few properties that we currently have approved. Having said that, I thought I'd just take a quick moment here to sort of emphasize the significance of having our communities involved in the project. I think I mentioned that it has taken us a bit of time to identify sites that we can work with, and it's just going to be really helpful if we can continue to work together on finding opportunities we have in the district to conduct assessment activities. With that, now that we finally have the ball rolling, our intention is to really keep this project as public as we can by engaging you all, engaging folks, so that we're taking advantage of any opportunities there might be. As we're successful with that, and let's say we add some additional sites from other communities, we'll rope in new members from those towns where we've identified new properties and do what we can to keep them engaged. There were some scheduling conflicts today, but I do want to point out that we have the town of Kingston represented on the committee now, and are currently working to get someone from either Bridgewater or Bridgewater State on here, since we'll be working with them on a property on campus on Hill Street. So this committee will be fluid as it takes on more work and will convene when updates are necessary. So as you know, I've been working together closely with Tracy from Verdantis, who came out on top during OCPC's RFP process. She's been absolutely terrific in helping us reach beyond the sites mentioned in our original application. And her and I have now met one-on-one with at least 10 communities, I think, throughout the region to discuss brownfields and vet any good potential candidates for the program. Um, we're in touch each week as we have our eyes on maybe a half dozen sites in different communities right now. Hanover, Abington, West Bridgewater, and name a few. Just some of them that we're looking at to try to learn more about or to gauge whether they pose a positive narrative for redevelopment or whether they can permit easy site access for assessment activities and that sort of thing. At this point, not only are we continuing to look at more sites, but we have assessment activities underway at 3 different properties. So much is being done, and as this is a federal grant, um, there's there's a lot of reporting. So naturally, we're keeping up with that and are in touch with our EPA project officer regularly to make sure everything is on par. So this is a list. Here's a list of the sites from our region that we have submitted to the EPA for eligibility approval. So for folks that do not know the process, and I'm learning as I go here, the EPA, before any sort of assessment work can be done, the EPA project officer has to sign off on whether the site meets certain criteria for eligibility. And to date, all but one site listed here has been approved, and we are waiting to hear back from our project officer on the Decor site at 602 Bedford Street in Whitman. Assessment activities are taking place with our sites in Hanson, Kingston, and Regal Shoe property in Whitman. All that said, I'm not going to get into too many details on these sites, as I know Tracy will be covering some of that in her portion of the presentation. But that sort of gives you a sense of where we are right now and where we were a while back and what's been done to date. This is not the most important thing for you guys to know, but I did want to provide just a quick update on our financial situation with respect to the $500,000 grant. Out of $500,000, we have spent only 12% of our total budget, so a little bit over 62,000. So we're in good shape. And the important item in our budget to monitor closely is obviously the amount of funds we have to conduct assessments under our contractual line item, which is worth $353,000 and change. That being said, we've only eaten up 11% of that. We have a lot of money to work with still. And the EPA, I know the EPA likes to see grant recipients spend around $125,000 of their funds by this time, sometime around the new year. So we should be getting close to that, I hope, at that time. And our aim is to also identify a few more sites that will obviously we anticipate will eat up a bit more of our budget. So hopefully some of the sites we're looking at will come through and some of the stuff that Tracy and I are talking about. Also, as sort of a quick reminder slide, this information outlines the goals we propose to strive for in our application. Our work plan stipulates a specific set of tasks we'd like to achieve with our award funds, and these include completing 10 Phase 1 ESAs and 7 Phase 2. So of those 10 sites, getting 7 far enough to start identifying and sampling for contaminants. Additionally, we hope to complete 1 site reuse assessment, 1 site reuse vision, 2 infrastructure evals, 2 resource roadmaps, 4 land use assessments, and 5 cleanup plans. This is gonna depend on how much coordination we get from communities, right? So who want to participate. So land use and real estate conditions inevitably change in our towns, and opportunities present themselves. Please keep this program in mind. You'll hear me repeat that a whole lot here. It's definitely an ambitious plan, but this is what we're shooting for, and we'll see where the path takes us. So that's sort of a good segue to the next slide on next steps. Over the next several weeks and months, Verdantis and myself will continue to search for brownfield sites in our region. We are vetting sites that have come up in conversations with many towns in the OCPC district, and our hope is to lock a few others remotely soon that we can then submit to the EPA for eligibility. Um, that said, so please give some extra thought to what sort of opportunities may be in your community. Um, Oftentimes they're not so obvious. I'll let Tracy talk about that in a bit, but I think the takeaway message from me here at the end of my portion of this presentation is that just be on the lookout for properties or movement on any local real estate that could pose significant opportunity for assessment or redevelopment efforts. So things change, right? And that's kind of my point. I think if let's keep our ears to the ground, as things are always sort of evolving. This is a great program, and we want to make sure that we take full advantage of it. And I think that's all I got. Tracy, if you're okay, I'll pass this over to you, and we can pick it up from there.
Sounds good. So hi, everybody. I think I know everyone here. So my name's Tracy Costa. We are the Qualified Environmental Professional, or QEP, that was hired by OCPC. I'm a licensed site professional in Massachusetts and our Northeast Brownfields leader. Next slide, please. So again, what we try to do is, as we're talking to municipalities, it's getting you to really start to think about what is a brownfield site. Sometimes they're not always so obvious. It might not always be a listed Mass DEP release site. It may sometimes be, but not always. There are cases where there could be perceived or suspect contamination that really, based upon historic commercial activities, also industrial activities. Oftentimes, some of those properties have not had assessment, so there are a lot of unknown risk or contamination. It might be to above ground structures like buildings with asbestos and lead-based paint. It could be below ground contamination to soil or groundwater. So again, there could also be tax default properties. As we talk to municipalities, we ask you to take a look at those, because oftentimes municipalities are not so eager to take those on as tax takings due to that risk. And here's where those assessments can come in and help a municipality understand the risk. And not only that, is you're able to have conversations with prospective developers or owners. It's really good to have done that assessment. You may have a lot of underutilized properties in town. For example, if you have an old mill property and only portion of it is occupied, you're not receiving that tax revenue that you might want to. And it might not also be in adherence to your plans in your municipality. So please take some time to think about those types of properties too. Also, vacant properties, properties where they're not really being maintained very well, an opportunity where we could perform assessment. And here you'll see a collapsing building. The example you see on the bottom is Webster Mill in North Attleboro. The town was really forced to demolish this building because it was a real hazard to the community. It was in danger of collapse, asbestos-containing materials. So certainly keep these types of properties in mind too. And there may be properties that they've been up for sale for a long time, but again, because of either that known or perceived contamination, they're not moving forward. Here's where we can work with you, work with prospective developers and owners to kind of help move some of these forward. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the sites we're currently working on. So this is a former fire station that's owned by the town of Kingston at 10 Maple Street. It's a little less than an acre. There had been some mass development assessment funding done, work on this site. So we're trying to fill in some data gaps. We've done an assessment to look inside the building and really want to try to help the town ready this for redevelopment. Oftentimes what we do is we don't try to make a science project out of it. We try to be very focused on our assessment. For example, trying to understand if this building, if it's got to be demolished, are there hazardous building materials? As I mentioned, asbestos, lead-based paint, PCBs, Also, will soil need to be managed offsite as part of construction and redevelopment? What we would do in a case like that is understand what type of contamination and really run some soil samples for what we refer to as a suite of waste characterization samples. And then thirdly, could there be any potential volatile organic compounds or VOCs that could migrate into future buildings? What we want to try to do again is now move this site forward to redevelopment with the understanding that mass development's already put a great deal of work into this. But again, it's just that sort of that next step to propel this site forward. And really, for us, the timing is very important because we're thinking ahead as to whether or not this site might need cleanup and really assist the town in being able to prepare for example, for a mass development cleanup grant under One Stop in June. So that's really so much is really this momentum that we want to try to work with municipalities on to move these sites forward. And the great thing is it's a real team-based effort where we're working with mass development, we're working with the municipalities. If there are also other opportunities under One Stop in terms of planning or what have you, we want to try to use as many tools in the toolboxes to really move these forward. So next slide, please. Oh, so this is one of my favorites, Regal Shoe Whitman. I had worked on this site a number of years ago at my last firm. This was a former, as you see, a shoe factory. What makes this really exciting, it's right next door to the MBTA commuter rail station. So a real prime opportunity for redevelopment. The town does not own this property. It's 20 acres. As you can see, there's a good portion of it does contain wetlands. There are some landfilled hides from the former shoe manufacturing. So we wanted to really focus on what the cost would be to manage those off-site. So again, there had been a lot of assessment done under a previous mass development assessment grant. We just want to focus on what's it going to take to remediate this site and ready it for redevelopment. Keep in mind, though, now in terms of cleanup, a municipality has to own the property to be eligible for mass development or EPA cleanup funding. So for us, again, we're trying to think ahead, work with the town of Whitman to really understand, so they can understand their risk if they decide to really foreclose on this property. So what we plan on doing, for example, is once we complete the phase 1 ESA, it's likely our focus is going to be on those landfill hides, collecting those samples for waste characterization, understanding any vapor intrusion issues, which I don't think there are on this site. But again, it's readying this, being ahead, readying this for site redevelopment, and trying to also, the other thing I want to mention is we also perform geophysical surveys to understand if there are any underground anomalies, such as underground storage tanks, buried waste. Not on this site so much, but what we've seen on a number of properties and in municipalities is that back in the day, buildings used to be demolished in place. So that could, in those cases, we could run into issues such as asbestos or what have you. But in terms of that buried, what we call construction and demolition or C&D debris, that could be a surprise that could come up during construction. So we want to really be ahead of that and understand is there any buried debris that could come into play during construction? Is that material geotechnically feasible for redevelopment? So again, using these tools in our toolbox to uncover any potential surprises before construction, before redevelopment, and understanding, getting our arms around what's the cleanup look like, what are the costs for the cleanup. Next slide, please.
Tracy.
Yes.
I want to just make sure I understand this, because I think when we started this process, I thought this was a program available to properties that the towns and communities don't own. But we can consider, so Easton is in the process of going out to bid for construction of new fire, police, and DPW facilities. So we have some excess properties that the town will be looking to dispose of at some point. We did receive under the One Stop for Growth program this year, a mass development grant for technical assistance in doing some feasibility analysis, which includes kind of a general identification of potential contaminants like asbestos and other pollutants on the site, but also importantly kind of looks at what's the feasibility, like the geographic constraints like wetlands, those type of things, and what's the feasible, what are feasible likely reuses. But it's, it's not a real in-depth, and it's not doing like a phase 1 and a phase 2. Can we add those properties to this project?
I think certainly. Why don't we talk to you offline, because that's really exciting. Yeah, absolutely, because that's a great thing about this program, to really understand whether there are any impacts that could really impede future redevelopment. So absolutely, Stephanie, we definitely look forward to having a conversation.
Yeah, we'll schedule a call, Stephanie, too. We can talk about it.
That sounds good. Yep. Great. And I'll be inviting Wayne Beitler, who is the community planner that works with me.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
So one thing I did not mention is before we can perform any assessment activities, we've got to obtain eligibility from EPA. And here's an instance in where we're waiting for eligibility clearance on the former Decor property. It's a 6-acre property, again, tax default property, not owned by the town of Whitman. However, the one issue is part of this property has PCBs contamination, which may not be covered by Brownfields because it's TSCA regulated. But we're trying to work with EPA to see if we can perform assessment on the portion of the property that has a chlorinated solvents release and stay outside of the PCBs area. So again, trying to work with EPA to figure out, is there a way we can still use this program? Because again, this is a site that has, just been unoccupied for years and years. It's not only an eyesore, but again, there is contamination at the site. Mass DEP has done a good amount of work to evaluate whether or not the chlorinated VOC plume extends towards or impacts residential properties. At this point, it hasn't. But again, a great property primed for redevelopment. Next slide, please. So similarly, Mass Development did perform. We actually worked with Mass Development and the town of Hanson on the light control property and completed a phase 1 and a phase 2 assessment. There are a couple of data gaps that we are trying to fill to get our arms around 2 areas of concern that require remediation. We were able to work with the town. The town was awarded a Mass Development cleanup grant on one of the AOCs where we do understand the contamination impacts, but there are a couple of others, one including PCBs underneath a portion of one of the buildings and petroleum hydrocarbons in another area. So this is a property that the town acquired as a gift, and it does have not an activity and use limitation under Mass DEP, but a deed restriction that really restricts future use. So again, it's the town is looking at various potential uses. As you see, it's close to Burridge Park, a recreational area. So the town could potentially carve some of that off and donate some of the land. But again, a lot of potential opportunities for either leasing and redeveloping. So it's a great site in a good sized property. Again, it's 11 acres, so really cool property for sure. And Precise Engineering, this is a site that's really dear to my heart. This site is across from a post office. It's in an area of mixed use development with a collapsing building, about 3 acres. the building is approximately 30 acres. So fortunately, I mean, the town has really stepped up, had installed a fenced enclosure to restrict trespassing. But again, it's a property where the town would love to see this move forward. If at some point that the building is demolished, there's an opportunity for us to do some assessment within the building footprint. This is yet another great property where Mass Development stepped in, provided assessment funding to perform an assessment outside of that building footprint. What you may not be able to see here, there's another Brownfields property to the west called Eastern State Steel. Mass Development also provided funding to perform assessment on that property. What makes this a little interesting is that the two properties are bisected by a former MBTA right-of-way. But as you can see, I mean, this is really prime for redevelopment. It would be great if at some point a developer could really purchase both properties. So the town has not done a taking on that western portion of the, I should say, I'm sorry, the Eastern State Steel site. But again, this is a site that I'm still the LSP of record on this. And again, I know that the town is very interested in trying to move this site forward. And Charlie, I know you're here if you have any comments. You're good. Okay. Yes. And lastly, we have received eligibility on this property. It was brought to our attention by the town of Bridgewater. It's a 1.5 acre site formerly known as Independent Nail, and it's owned by Bridgewater State University. So we are trying to work with the town, and I know that OCPC is trying to establish some dialogue with the university on what their interest is. It is a former building. You can see portions of it were demolished. So there could be certainly some various issues, concerns, but boy, what a great site for cleanup and redevelopment. So we're pretty excited to see this site move forward and really hope to be a part of this. So again, I mean, what we want to try to do is be your partner. So we are available to not only have one-on-one discussions with you. You see, we have Mass Development here. We can bring EPA into the discussions, but it might be just something where, again, it's kind of an intimate one-on-one conversations with you, with folks, stakeholders in these communities, where it might be something where together we can just do a site walk and understand where are your pain points? Where can we help out? Oftentimes, keep in mind, owners may be concerned about, gosh, anytime we do some sampling, there could be a potential for a Mass DEP reportable concentration. So a reporting threshold is exceeded, and now the owner becomes a responsible party. We try to talk owners through that. If, for example, we're only doing a hazardous building materials survey, that's not something that's going to be reportable to Mass DEP unless there's evidence of a release to the neighborhood. For example, friable asbestos. But again, if it's a site or a property that's for sale and it's not moving forward, oftentimes a prospective purchaser or developer wants to see that work done. Either they'll perform the assessment, but if there's an opportunity where the owner and the developer can have this done at no cost to them, it's very beneficial. So we can assist you in having these conversations, these discussions with owners and prospective purchasers. And really, as a team, we want to help you continually identify funding opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, we really think about the timing of this so that if we're performing an assessment and know it's a great opportunity for cleanup, we try to ensure that we're getting our assessment done before the community One Stop for Growth deadlines for Mass Development funding, and also later in the fall for the EPA funding. So we're trying to take full advantage of the bill funding because it's really unprecedented. So timing really is of the essence.
And I guess I would add, Tracy, I think it's been really helpful to sort of meet with town staff or planners. I feel like we've had a few meetings now with folks not having much knowledge about what there might be in one particular community, and having these conversations has been helpful. People might not necessarily know that this particular property is or is not a brownfield, but in those instances, I think it's been helpful if people think there's a property they're unsure of, like we have the opportunity to sort of vet that and dig into it a little bit. So even if it's something that you drive by or you pass by, it's something that we can look into. And I think that's kind of how a lot of our conversations have gone. And lastly, it seems like there's, and Tracy, you tell me, but I think there seems to be a trend, right, where we're engaging private property owners. There's always the concern that Tracy had mentioned, and I think it's a lot of it is like kind of the sell about, well, if you're going to do something with this property, here's your chance to do this stuff for free because you're probably going to end up having to do this anyway. So trying to find a way to communicate that to these communities so that then when they're engaging property owners, they can have that correct conversation without turning property owners off about the program. But that's what I just thought I'd add. Tracy, do you have anything to add on that, or is that?
I didn't mention is that this grant also includes planning. So
Yeah.
that's really the advantage of really having OCPC managing a grant like this, because it's beyond just the assessment. It's working with municipalities, and you let me have you just really talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, I think this is going to be super helpful. This project in itself is helpful to us because it sort of helps us get a much. I mean, we're vetting like each town for brownfields, right? So it's helping us gain an understanding about the need for brownfields redevelopment in our district, but exactly where they are, what these properties look like, and there seems to be. I'm learning a little bit about like PCBs and all this stuff I never knew about before, but you get to see what sort of expectations there are when you find a property and consider what might be in the soil and that type of thing. But so it has some sort of greater use for us on the planning front. And ideally, again, I think I mentioned in my remarks, ideally, like if a property has a great redevelopment potential or potential narrative that looks like, I don't know if it's like an Eastern State Steel or precise engineering sites in a great location. Great narrative there for redevelopment and sort of connecting things to East Bridgewater Center and the downtown there. The better. Those types of stories are great, but yeah, that's it. I think that pretty much wraps up basically everything. But again, we wanted to keep you all informed of our progress, and our hope is to get some more participation from communities and add some more sites. We're a little bit behind in that respect, but we're getting caught up, and we want to get the most that we can out of this program. In its 4 years. So if something comes up, we're more than happy to connect, and that's about everything. So I guess with that, happy to open it up to questions. If anyone has any particular questions, we can answer them, and if not, we can close it out. Any particular questions from folks now?
It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Oh,
in
good.
terms of publicity about the sites, Nick, in the sense of, I was thinking, while we were all talking and saying about looking for sites, I don't know whether it's appropriate or not to do more publicity in general, basically to property owners who don't know, let's put it that way, they don't know what they've got, but they might be a site that might qualify.
Yep.
I think you approached me about one site here up on Route 18, for instance.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know enough about East Bridgewater to know what other possibilities might exist. But if we're looking for sites, trying to do more of a broad-based approach, of outreach.
Yeah.
It's here or other communities.
Yeah, no, I think that makes 100% sense. Tracy, I don't know if does the program have any sort of like constraints on what you can, in terms of outreach and promoting the pro. I mean, it
Oh,
seems like
I think certainly EPA definitely advocates, outreach for sure. And again, it's always trying to really understand the appetite of a municipality, understand, if we were, for example, looking, the sort of easiest example is a municipality has a downtown revitalization plan. They've got an idea of a number of a number of properties that they'd like to acquire, divest themselves of, and like to see various reuse of. That makes it real straightforward and easy, right? But again, if you've got various areas of the town where there could be commercial growth or also maybe industrial growth where you have great tax revenue, but there are also various pockets. We want to help you understand where we can use this funding. And the other piece is this: developers get it. A lot of developers, they're very savvy, they get it. But maybe it's an opportunity to even assist you as a municipality in having that dialogue with an owner. And I don't know how often that might happen, where on Route 18, for example, you see a big for sale sign on an old industrial property. And I know the one you're talking about. Is it talking to the real estate broker? Is it something where, but again, it's understanding too, is the owner hesitant to do anything? But we're here to help you have that dialogue. Again, because these are great opportunities to move these forward. Because certainly if you've got a developer, the developer is going to go in and likely do some sampling anyhow, and we can really help move that forward if we do this in advance on behalf of the owner. And that could be certainly a selling point for sure.
absolutely. And I think, Charlie, to your point, I think, right, I think there's some easy things we could do on our end to improve outreach so that this information gets out there. But I agree. With that, I think I thank you all for hopping on, and if anyone has any questions or things that come up, just give me a call or email me, and we'll connect. But that's it. So thanks for hopping on.
Thank you all.
Thank
See you,
you.
Charlie.
Thanks, everyone.